special edition of Off Planet Radio. It's the weekend edition. It's April 6th, 2013. I'm Randy Moggins, and the show's on hiatus from live shows right now, but I wanted to jump in and do this special weekend broadcast because sometimes things hit us that are time sensitive and we need to respond to in a reasonable fashion. For those of you who are hearing this, Off Planet Radio Live will return on April 17th when we will have Scott Allen Roberts on to talk about the secret history of the reptilians. So that will be the beginning of the spring season. Tonight, today, this morning, whenever you're hearing this, we're recording it actually about 9:30 p.m. Saturday night East Coast time. I have with me Chris Holly, and this is a UFO update. We're going to talk tonight about a coast-to-coast AM show that recently aired. It aired the night of Easter, the morning of April Fool's Day, which causes me no end of amusement of how that overlapped this year. And so Chris sent me a link to an article she had written that I had just begun reading on UFO Digest, our space program, UFOs and the Truth. Chris Holly, welcome back to the show.
Hello, Randy. I'm glad to be here, and this is a very interesting show. I think that all the people probably should listen to, because I know and you know what was said on that coast-to-coast amazing show in the middle of the night.
In the middle of the night, when most of the world is sleeping, certainly here in America. Now, Europe's another story, but, well, isn't it interesting how this stuff gets aired at times when most of America is sleeping, and let's face it, most of America is sleeping most of the time anyway.
Well, that's true, but when someone takes the time to do a radio broadcast of probably some of the biggest, most powerful news that, in my mind, should have been all over the news the next day, all over the internet, and chooses at 1 o'clock in the morning on Easter when everybody's been family exhausted, and goes into, April Fool's, as you said, takes that time period to do it. You have to scratch your head and say, what in the world is going on? I just heard absolutely worldwide amazing news. Why is it being played to us now? So the whole thing, from beginning to end, including what was said and the subject matter, was one of the most bizarre things I think I've sat through in years. What's your opinion?
Yeah, and quite honestly, I don't listen to a lot of coast-to-coast programming, so this might have gone by me if it weren't for you, Chris. What we're talking about here is, first off, the interview that we're discussing specifically from Coast to Coast is the interview by George Knapp with Robert Bigelow, the head of Bigelow Aerospace, and the man who apparently is working towards privatizing space exploration. And there's a number of issues wrapped around all of this. There's two parts to what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the ongoing contracts that apparently have been entered into with NASA, of which Bigelow speaks in the first part of this interview, and which I'm given to understand these contracts are to be made public over the course of this coming week in the United States, but the contracts were actually already given to George Knapp as part of this interview, but we weren't allowed to see them on the Coast website, so we don't have a lot of detail. Mr. Knapp had the inside skinny on this, so maybe what you can do is kind of give us a narrative to work from, Chris, in terms of where we're going with this, what this means, and in terms of the privatization of the space program, given that NASA has basically at this point been gutted by federal budget cuts and sequestering.
Well, in my mind, what it told us clearly was that Mr. Bigelow and his aerospace company and companies that he is in business with and doing business with, and part of all of the above, are going to basically take over our space program and NASA and maintain the ongoing reach out into space, but to take us to a different level, because it's dead as it's been standing. It's dead. He wants to really bring it up to speed. He wants to put a space station out there, which he already has his own private one, which he hired Russia to help launch out there, or he's working on it, almost has one of his own complete. And he's on a mad rush for a base on the moon against China. Now, that's where it is. But the main thing is, America, listen, he is telling you that our space program is going to be run and pushed forward and maintained by a private company, and that's where our tax dollars, which are going to be enormous, are going to go to this private company to push us into space at the hands of this man and his organization. Now, you might first, you don't know where to go with this kind of information. Oh, this is horrible, or thank God, at least it'll get done. The answer is somewhere in between. I was at first terrified by this thought, and after I thought about it, actually almost relieved, because we are so backwards in this area that I guess unless we take someone that actually knows how to do it, has already gotten it done on his own, and has the fortitude and will to do it for the country, unless that happens, it's not going to happen. So that's basically the first part of it, and what he talked about. It's going to be a tremendous expense for the United States, which we will probably never realize, because that's the way we fund things.
Well,
in a very twisted manner.
I have some concerns about it, and I have concerns from the standpoint of the privatization of space, and I have talked about this on previous radio shows. I'm not against private interests investing in the exploration of space, nor am I against the idea that it obviously takes a lot of money to do this. It takes a lot of infrastructure, knowledge, and expertise. But by the same token, we have a huge infrastructure that we built up in NASA since the late 1950s that was an investment by the American taxpayer into a program that rolled through Mercury, Apollo, and all the programs that came after that, leading up to the International Space Station. So private contractors along the way have always been a part of this. You have huge aerospace concerns that have been part of the working model of NASA itself. And this again goes back to contractors and all that's involved with this. I think my biggest concern is the payback to the American people, and there are any number of areas where we would probably want to look at what is the return on investment for private contractors in space. I just read an article recently, and I wished I would have clipped it. I didn't. That had to do with the mining of materials on meteors and the net value of mineral rights on a single large meteor, and it was something to the tune of over $100 billion in rare mineral rights that would be found on a meteor. So we're talking potentially very big money. So again, I'm not against the private investment. I'm just wondering, do the American taxpayer ever get a payback from all the money that we've rolled into NASA? And what does that mean when people like Bigelow Aerospace and SpaceX are out there, and it looks like they're going to basically go the next level in privatizing the space system?
Well, I think you're absolutely right with every point you just made. And my answer would be, and I know this is like an astounding statement to say, is I don't think we're going to get back much except to be able to stay alive. And you say, what? The reason I say that is Robert Bigelow, well, people don't really know who he is. This man is space. That's who he is, as far as the United States, anyway, is concerned. He has his fingers into everything that's done with space. He knows more about space than any other agency, as well as UFOs and aliens. This man owns Skinwalker Ranch, which he openly discussed in this interview as definitely having strange actions and strange behaviors taking place on it, that he is having difficulty investigating and researching, which tells me that he knows exactly what's going on, and it's not easy, and that he understands the necessity for us to pick up our speed with dealing with not only space, but our cosmic neighbors. With that said, if we don't get where he's trying to go fast, we will either be totally left behind or possibly at the hands of other possible creatures, beings, intelligences that we are completely unable to deal with because we don't even accept the fact they exist yet.
Yeah, we're being consumed by our own ignorance right now.
Right. So are we going to see a financial economic gain by this? I don't know. The chances are no. It probably will go all into the private sector, and that does help the economy because they do, provide jobs, blah, 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 but not much more. Are we going to pay for it? Probably yes. And the dividend is probably very, very possibly your life. And I mean that in lots of ways, including warfare, military advancement, weaponry, climate control, all kinds of things that are going to be part of this package along the way. So I don't think we have a choice, that's number one. And number two, I think that I feel more positive than I do negative about this because I don't have a choice. And after listening to the man, I felt him a bit more forthcoming. Well, he came right out and laid it all out for us in this interview. But before that, I was frightened of him. I wasn't sure of what he was doing, how he was going to do it, and what he knew. But in this interview, he came out and told us he's going to privatize it, he's going to do it, he's going to put a base on the moon, he's going to put a space station up in space, and he is going to give the rest of the world a run for reaching out into the cosmos, which we need to do. Not to mention, this guy knows all about UFOs and aliens. He admitted it straight out in the interview. And that, to me, is where my chin hit the table. He didn't want to call it disclosure. He had another word, which I can't think of now.
Confirmation.
Confirmation, yes. Right, that he chose to use. I mean, that's, tomato, whatever. It's the fact was, he said, yes, there's UFOs and there's aliens, and that's basically what he said. And if anyone knows that on this planet, it would be Robert Bigelow, because of all his involvement in the subject matter and how much he is involved out in space now, and the fact that he owns one of the most, sought after UFO places probably that is ongoing, at least in the United States, which is the Skinwalker Ranch. So this man knows what's going on, and he's now decided to start to tell us. Now, anyone that's interested in this at all, or in your own future, this interview should be listened to and dealt with. This is not a little ghost story around a campfire with 12-year-olds. This is a very, very wealthy man in control of all this stuff, telling you the facts of life. So, it was astounding to me. And to be sitting in Easter, with my candy laid out in front of me, which I listened to the show because someone tipped me off to do so. But I never anticipated hearing what I heard.
For the listeners who don't know, Robert Bigelow is not an engineer. He is not an aeronautics specialist. He made his fortunes in Las Vegas, Nevada in the real estate business. And he has had a long-term interest in UFOs, UFO sightings. I believe he's recounted that there were something like a close encounter 3 within his own family. I think he's talked about his grandparents being involved with that. He has a lot of interest in the paranormal and a lot of interest in the consciousness movement as well. So, I mean, these all bode well in terms of Bigelow having a larger grasp. I guess, Chris, for me, the question has been, are we looking at somebody who is going to facilitate a more structured approach to, first off, dealing with the issue of space, which clearly NASA has its problems largely because of Congress, but then secondly, we go into the area of what is called disclosure. And anybody that's listened to me knows I do not like the term disclosure. It's tainted by the people who have bandied it around for a long time. Mr. Bigelow uses the term confirmation, which is a much more managed flow of information. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with a managed flow of information either. So we're kind of straddling things here, Chris. Give me your takeaway on what you heard Mr. Bigelow saying in terms of what he calls confirmation versus what most people have discussed as disclosure, which would be full-blown throwing everything out there.
Well, he just will not do that. He doesn't believe that should be done, and I kind of agree with that because I've dealt with the public and these subject matter of UFOs and aliens for a long time, most of my life, and I know the reaction. And the reaction is always negative and refusal, denial, objection. They don't want to deal with it. I think his take understands that, and his slow approach, his feed them a few crumbs at a time to get them to slowly digest and understand this, is his hope of turning a society that's dead against it to opening up and realizing it. He gave an example of Denmark, I believe it was, wasn't it, Randy, where they had a massive UFO situation where they sent their military up after them and the crafts and could get nowhere and could not defend against them or, deal with them in any way. All they ended up doing was flying around burning up a lot of fuel and getting nowhere. And in Denmark, the population all knew about it, all knows about it, now talks freely about this and accepts and understands that there are other life forms out there and UFO crafts. In this country, we don't do that, and he is trying to slowly drag us up to it, because I think if he just came out and laid out the information that he obviously knows, and the evidence, and probably the even hard material evidence he has that this exists and this is what's going on, he would fear for a complete, total social collapse. And I agree with him, because this is what happened. I wrote that article immediately after I heard the show. I took and I had to go around and find a YouTube of the show and put it on my site. As soon as I would put up a video, it would be taken down. Private use, it was taken down. I must have put up 6 or 7 videos, like, in 3 days. I don't understand why, if we're going to make an announcement like that, the people that then put them on their YouTubes would be forced to take them down. I finally found a video that's still running on my site with the whole interview that's being left alone. That, to me, was odd. Why do you want... It just goes to show you how he didn't want... They don't, coast to coast, Mr. Bigelow, who's ever really controlling the flow of this information, the management, as you put it, didn't want it just thrown out there real quick. They wanted to slowly feed it a little bit at a time to society. And again, it's the fear of what would happen. I agree with that, and I disagree with it both. I think that you can make gestures a little bit more obvious to the public, and they will not fall apart. You cannot bring an alien and stand him on the White House lawn and have an interview with him. Panic would become, terrible.
No, it's not going to happen anyway.
But they can slowly say these crafts seem to be real. It looks like we're dealing with something, yada yada yada, and start to get people to listen. They're going a little bit, dragging their feet a little bit too much, unless, of course, they have a private agenda that we're not, privy to. But I took and I put that YouTube on there, and I had people coming and listening to this interview that Coast to Coast did. And I had a few people write to me that even with this man, either they don't know who he is, they refuse to listen to the interview, or they just are so stubborn they're going to reject it, told me that just because he says that, they still don't believe it, and unless they see it with their own two eyes, it's all just garbage. So when you're dealing with a society like that, what is the right approach? I'm losing my way.
Well, one of the things that impressed me about listening to Mr. Bigelow, and you know that I listen to this very critically, and I listen to it from the standpoint that I'm not necessarily in favor of everything that Robert Bigelow espouses, but one of the things that impressed me was actually, Bigelow pointed out correctly that the UFO phenomena is not one phenomena, that we're dealing with multiple layers of things that have all been jumbled together. He's extremely interested in the work in the consciousness field, which goes into the work of Dr. Edgar Mitchell, who's been out there, who I believe he's also worked with. But I believe Bigelow is savvy enough to realize that public resistance, the pushback from anything that would be what we would call a full-blown disclosure simply is not tenable in our system. Now, I have a clip here, and if you'll humor me a little bit, I'll play this, and maybe for the listeners out there who haven't heard the Coast to Coast show, this will help to clarify a little bit of it. This is a clip from the Robert Bigelow interview with George Knapp on Coast to Coast.
Into revealing a lot of details.
Details about the technology.
Yeah, there are a combination of things that need to be addressed very, very seriously. A lot of those things would have definite impingement upon national security. There are also companies involved, and they have proprietary rights to that information. So you have the laws of ownership that stand behind foursquare a company or corporation to protect their rights and their property that they've invested a lot of money in. And from a national security point, you couldn't deny the United States government wanting to protect itself. You can't really find fault for a lot of its leadership to do what they've always felt has been in the best interest of its people, to protect them from worrying about a lot of things, because you can do that even by having incomplete information. And that's one of the problems, is that when you start getting into disclosure, then the speculation never ends. So you have every radio talk show host constantly speculating and trying to raise the temperature of public angst over the topic unnecessarily. So disclosure to me is a much more serious kind of process that needs to be orchestrated very carefully, and probably would come sometime, maybe even years after confirmation has been established.
So what's your takeaway from that particular clip, Chris?
Well, I read that as being told that they are just really afraid to tell the American people or North America, or basically North America, that they have as much information as they already do. And the fear of that is how the society is going to react. And don't forget, this is a time period now where we're struggling on many levels in America with war and economy and all kinds of things, people out of work, and just adding this onto it, they're afraid to do it. That's number one. Number two, they really can't do anything to protect us more than they are doing against other beings, other dimensional interactions, encounters, whatever, UFOs, crafts, whatever. And it's right, there's all kinds of things out there involved with this. There's not much they can do because we are not the upper hand in this scenario, which I think people realize. I mean, I think one of the funniest things that for me to listen to is people that discuss how they're going to fight the aliens, or how we would go to war with
that Steven Spielberg falling sky scenario.
Right. Put down the pipe and clear your heads, because you are nothing to these creatures. They're so more advanced than we are that they would control us probably in 15 minutes, and you would just be numb and not have a chance to run and get your sticks and stones and whatever else you think you're going to beat them up with. So there's so much involved here, and how do you tell a society that's more or less a bit broken right now? Oh, and by the way, we have now, as he kind of admitted, have some information that's real and solid and a real grasp on what these things are and what's going on, but we can't tell you. You're too fragile. And that's what I think his whole ball of wax is with what he just said. He used a lot of different agendas, the private this and that, but basically the government really can't do anything to help you right now except keep it peaceful with what's going on, with the interaction between space and Earth. And that they are doing. And this man definitely seems to be the catalyst between the whole situation. And that's just the way it is. And his call is to baby feed you pablum on this until at least you get the seed as a society that there's more out there, it's real. And when you stop laughing so hard and ridiculing and attacking people that have dealt with them, maybe they'll feed you a little bit more. And I think this interview in the middle of the night, on a night where there were not many listeners, that they are also controlling, that they don't even want you to hear again till they're ready, was the first little dribble of pay attention, people, there are things going on. It's time for you to slowly start to listen. And I think we heard the first seeds of that.
Yeah, let me play this. I got another clip here. It's 2 minutes and 33 seconds, Chris, and if you need to duck out for a second, that's fine. But this is basically dealing with this disclosure issue again from Coast to Coast on April 1st, early morning hours. George Knapp with Robert Bigelow.
You travel in interesting circles. You work with a lot of military folks. You've had a lot of consultants and advisors who've been in intelligence agencies. Because of that, some people view you with suspicion. But can you tell us, in a nutshell, what the core story is? I mean, is there enough proof that, there is some kind of an intervention or a coexistence with non-human intelligence? Is it real?
It is probably... It so dwarfs the space topic. I like to always keep anchored in the space world, because I think that helps to work in this other more esoteric kind of area. It kind of gives us a foundation, and so it kind of anchors discussions in connection to the real world. But I think the fact is that what I usually tell people is I say, look, you've really got to do the research. It's impossible for me to tell you. I am so utterly convinced that I have zero doubt that I passed that a long time ago because of a lot of different things that I've seen, things that have occurred to me, things that I have been able to be privy to as a in confidence from other folks. So then it does get back to whether or not somebody will take the time and trouble to do the research. And the pile of evidence in so many different areas is so huge. And obviously, I admit that if you can acquire confidence of other people to where they know they can trust you, that's very important. If they have something important to divulge to you, that obviously that's important too. So all that gets back to acquiring information and being able to be trusted with it, and then seeing all right, now that you have this information, what's the responsible thing to do? And that comes full circle now to my feelings about confirmation. And it's taken me a lot of years to get to this point. And I think it's also been a maturing process with the public as well, via the media. And because I think there are times for things to occur, and there's times when things should not occur.
He says a whole lot there if you listen between the lines, doesn't he, Chris?
No, he sure does. And he could have just said yes.
He could have, but what he was telling you there was he knows a lot of people. Look, I interviewed Major Commander Bob Dean, one of the earliest interviews that I did. And Bob Dean was just totally out there with it. Yes, we have interactions with ETs. They've been here a long time. They're among us. And Bob Dean was using both his connections within the Pentagon, his military and intelligence contacts, as well as having been given firsthand knowledge by reading a report in 1962. So there are people who have talked, there are people who know, who are inside the government. They're simply not going to plaster it on the front page of the New York Times on a Sunday morning edition.
Yeah, absolutely. And that he used a lot of words in a lot of different directions to tell you, I think plainly, if you just listen to what he said right there, is yes, we have interaction with aliens. He knows firsthand, very possible his life before he's that deeply involved in what he's doing right now, obviously was intertwined with some type of encounter or experience or ongoing experience, or as you said, family ongoing experiences. This man is as compulsive to do this as other people that are doing this that have had their own, let's just say, strangeness or paranormal events happen in their life. There's two types of people involved in the paranormal or UFO community. I'm going to say paranormal, covering everything. It's those who want to do this for attention and to be famous and so forth and so on, that have absolutely never had an encounter or really know what they're talking about. And the other is those who have endured, experienced, lived through experiences that now have become so intense inside them that they have a compulsion to write or do radio shows or YouTubes or whatever it is around the subject matter that make absolutely no money on it. It's a compulsion. Yeah. They don't even know why they do it. And I'm one of those people.
as am I. Yeah.
And I was just going to say, and so are you. So is he. And that's my belief on this. However, he's involved or was given the ability or has been put in this place where he is now at the upper echelon level of it, and he's going to control it as far as advancement in this country. And that's how I see it, and that's what I think he just told us. And you just have to, as you say, listen in between the lines to what he's actually telling you. And that's what, when I heard those statements, I said to myself, oh, you know, you're doing this because probably you have no choice, and it's been part of your life that you now have built up or been given the ability or helped to bring to this level, which is our advancement into space.
Well, you know, it's interesting because he admits in the interview, I might not have been on this one, but it was one that I read, where he had not even told his wife ultimately what his plans were in terms of taking the money that he was making and then turning around and funding certain choice projects. Let me just give you a little bit of background here again. Bigelow actually is kind of the founder of Coast to Coast. In '92, he funded a show called Area 2000 that was hosted by Art Bell, and at that time also did feature George Knapp, who Knapp has had exclusive rights to literary works on the Skinwalker Ranch, which Bigelow owns. I guess Linda Moulton Howe was part of this. While Bigelow later withdrew his sponsorship from that show, Bell continued it and evolved it into what then effectively became Coast to Coast. Bigelow also created the National Institute of Discovery Science in '95 to investigate border phenomena, and he was associated at that time with Jacques Vallée, Hal Puthoff, Melvin Morse, and Edgar Mitchell. And so these are some pretty heavy hitters. The baffling part of this to me was that particular group was put into an active status back in the middle of this last decade due to what they cited as a lack of worthwhile causes to investigate. And see, that's what bothers me about this. These projects seem to get shelved as quickly as they're funded. So Bigelow has been around doing this for a long time now. In terms of we're going back into the '90s now in terms of what he's funded. So he's had a willingness to fund and underwrite researchers in this particular area as well.
That's one of the things. I mean, I want to say this is our prayers are answered. Somebody's going to actually grab this subject matter and, research it and bring it to us, maybe little at a time, but somebody will be in control of it. It just will not be this floating monster, is how I feel about it, that nobody has a grasp on, that people refuse to deal with. It's the 800-pound, gorilla sitting in the living room at all times that people refuse to deal with that could be deadly. And that's how I view the UFO subject and the alien subject. The thing with Bigelow that I can't wholeheartedly give over to him is one area or one big question. Let's put it this way. I know a lot of people in the paranormal. I've dealt with many, many people. There are only a handful that I know are truthful, honest, really intelligent people that have actually dealt with real events that they don't understand, that they can't get answers to, and they are trying to. The rest of it, the people get caught up in the like a cult thing. They get their little following, and then they start to some of them might be able to make some money on it, and that overtakes everything. My problem is Robert Bigelow at Coast to Coast and all the people that you mentioned there did nothing while the paranormal on the internet, especially, of course, was overrun by every nitwit in the world that was either lonely, bored, silly, wanted a fan club, wanted to try to make a fast buck, wanted to write a book, made up stories, faked this and that, videos, photos, everything fake, stories that are ridiculous, little crazy old ladies that would, have a following, saying things that were so childish and terrible. They let that bloom around them and did nothing about it. Well, if you really want to control and know what's actually happening out there, why did they let it get that muddy? And don't tell me they couldn't have stopped it. They could have. They also have the ability to pick out the people who are bright, telling the truth, have had experiences over those who have not. Why didn't they pick out the people that could gather that information, that did have experiences of their own, that they could have got a tonnage of a wealth of facts and information to use, and let that become lost to the fakes, frauds, and BSers of the internet, so that today we have a huge mess, just a horrible mess that's almost impossible to sort out. If he really wanted to do and wants to do what he now is saying, and Coast to Coast is helping him or part of it, why did they do that? And why did they also block out and lock out a lot of the new people that really knew what they were talking about?
Well, this is how disinformation works. Unfortunately, what has been seeded into the internet is a combination of forces that wanted to, is there a nice way to put this? They wanted to pee in their cornflakes, or a bunch of willing dupes that were going to go out there and do this because there was money, notoriety, publicity, sensationalism, the ability to go to conferences and make, these big splashy displays in front of hundreds of people that are willing to pay for it. The public gullibility is probably one of the core issues from my perspective, and it's why, in spite of how hard we work as the true alternative media, it's difficult to get the message out, and it's difficult for people like you and I to fund ourselves, to keep, even sometimes just a website moving. To be able to work on this requires huge hours of intense work, and yet at the same time, this has become almost an entertainment genre that has now been so diluted by the disinformation agents out there and the people who are simply sensationalists.
Yeah, it's an impossible. It's like, as I said to you once, it's like swimming in a cesspool and just hoping you're going to be able to keep your head above water. It's almost impossible to keep your dignity and survive while trying to tell people things that maybe one day would actually save their life. And I'm tired of people coming at me and saying things about anal examinations, and I say, wait a minute. First of all, you've never read anything that I have ever written, nor that I ever said that ever included anything like that. The people that I write about that have had abduction experiences and were taken and harmed have no memory of anything going near anything anal on them. It was never said of it.
This is just a cliche. You know that as well as I do.
But that's right. But that is mainstream thinking. And it's an insult to people that maybe now have broken spines or terrible diseases or horrible burns that won't heal. Lots of awful things that they are walking around with due to these experiences, and they don't even try to get help. Do you really want to be humiliated and ridiculed and abused after you've been victimized, kidnapped, and hurt, to come home and then have it done to you again by your own kind? So all that information that they should have, what these people are really going through, is lost because of the mess that this has become. And I do hold them somewhat responsible because they had the ability and the money to straighten it out and keep it cleaned up a lot better than it is today. and they chose to back off and let it become this huge mess. I guess they thought it was their way to manage and control it, but what it did was cause a terrible strain and complete breakdown and collapse in this subject matter that I don't know if they're ever going to be able to weed through, making him and what he's trying to do lose years of precious information and research and things they need to advance. It was like they bit their own nose off their own face. It just didn't. It backfired. And I have to say, for a bunch of people that are very smart, that are trying to control all of this, why did you let that happen? And that makes me weary and leery of them still. And a little bit, I want to take a leap of faith and say this is really great and give my all to it, but while they stay away from the people that know and act the way they're acting, I find it difficult. I wrote an article once and said I had a group, which is now disbanded because the people are disgusted, but they all were abducted and all had physical problems from it that they could not get help for,
this was
that no one could diagnose.
Real-time abductees.
The real-time abductee groups. And I said that they were willing to have a scientific research team from either a university or a hospital or even a team like from Bigelow's come and meet with them to show them what happened to them. Do you know not one person responded? And I know that university after university reads what I write, and that other groups throughout the world that are involved with these subject matters read what I wrote, and no one contacted us. And that disgusted these people. That was their limit. Where they were willing, one last time, to say, look at this. This is what was done to me. Either help me or help me understand it or look at it, so you see what happens to people. And not one person came forth. That's craziness. I was asked if I would give over all their personal and private names and that type of thing, and I wouldn't do it because that was not needed. I was going to protect them. I said, first you have to give me something that you will protect them also, and that they refused and walked away. So this is just awful.
Well, I think what you pointed out there is basically the ghettoization of the disclosure movement, the real disclosure movement, because quite honestly, Chris, there's nobody out there doing this kind of work that you're doing. There's very few people that are doing the level of shows that we're trying to put out at Off Planet Radio, because we're not going to allow ourselves to be compromised. We're not going to be censored. We can't be bought off. We're doing this out of a passion. Like you said earlier, why do we do this? Well, I didn't even want to do this. I fought against doing this for years. And some of the listeners out there are going to know that I have outed myself. I did an interview last week where I talked a little bit about my motivations behind this and some of the things that happened in my life that were an impetus for doing the radio shows. I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to talk about this. But there comes a point when I think you're sort of moved by your own inner being to go forward and do something because you've got a mission and you have the ability to do it. And my hope is that in doing this show with you, Chris, we kind of begin to bridge a few gaps in the alternative media and draw some very distinct lines. Most of the large media outlets out there that are handling paranormal UFO type material, the big ones, you really have to look at and understand that they've been compromised. That's not to say that everything they say is wrong. That's not to say that everyone that they bring onto their shows or everyone who is doing shows are compromised. You simply have to understand the disinfo has been placed out there, and the only way that you sandwich disinfo is to have enough good info to be the white bread on the outside of the sandwich.
That's true. And I also think that we need to get back to people talking about things they actually know. In other words, I don't know a lot about ghosts, so I have had a few strange experiences that I'll write about. But I'm not an expert on it. I'm not an expert on a lot of those things. So I try to stay in the area that I know. So I know what I'm talking about when I speak. I can tell you from experience what a thing is like. I wish that more people like that would come out and, as you said, not try to go after the sensational, not try to be, everybody's golden child on every subject. Talk and write about what you know, that you're sure about, and we might actually get someplace. And that's not done too often. And as far as radio host shows, you want to have a radio host like Randy here, who is one of the very few out there who knows how to question who he's talking to. He knows how to go for the information. He's not busy trying to say how smart he is and how much he knows, and which is a big problem in the radio community, is they go into competition with their guest speaker instead of trying to draw out
contests, I call them.
Right. Instead of dragging out the information that everybody needs to hear, which Randy is an expert at. You don't get too much better. Randy gets me to say things that after the show I say, oh my God, I can't believe I told him that. But he gets it out there. And believe me, if I can reach one 15-year-old young woman like I once was long ago, from having to endure an experience I did at that age, and she learned from something I wrote or said how to maybe run in the other direction, or run up to a house and pound on the door, or head for some lights, or just not stand there like a deer in the headlights long enough to be taken. I did something, because I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy some of the parts that I had in my life on anyone. So and I'm not going to be quiet about it, because why? Nobody asked me if I wanted to endure these things. It just happened to me. It was forced on me. Well, I'm going to go out there and try to counteract that and say, listen to me, trust me, in the dead of night, you don't want to be the next one that's looking into the cold, dead eyes of the unknown all alone. Try to learn from those who have how to survive it, what to do if you think it's happening to you, and at all costs avoid the situation. And if I'm able to do that, I got a little bit of revenge back from what was done to me.
Chris, you've been probably one of my most durable guests in terms of coming on, speaking your mind, and bringing out the unpleasant facts that people don't want to hear. And I consider you now a regular part of the work that I do. And, you were very gracious with me. I just want to say that, having you as part of what I do is becoming increasingly important, because you're a voice for people out there who are hurting. And I know that we reach people. I get the emails. I'm sure you get them too. There are people listening. They're finding us. It's not easy, but they are finding us. They're finding the information, and they are waking up a little bit. Those of us who already know don't need to be told. We need to be bell ringers. The people who need to know are the general public, and as Mr. Bigelow talked about in his interview on Coast to Coast, how do we do that and not freak them out? Because quite frankly, most of them right now are, kind of in a coma. So part of disclosure is on that level of bringing the awareness and pushing it out there into the general public. And there are optimistic signs at times, if we could take the entertainment side of it out. The other side of it is to support the people out there who have been targets, the people who have experienced the paranormal, the strange, the terrifying, and don't know what to do with it. In that case, we become an important touchstone for them to begin dealing with what's happened in their lives and their own healing as well. And that's work that I think you've done at a journeyman's level, Chris.
Well, thank you. And you know, Randy, you do it too. You do it every time you do a show. You try to take a piece of strangeness that's unknown and deliver it and put it in a bowl that they can chew, swallow, digest, and understand. And, what else can we do? I had people say to me, you've got to stop it with these interviews, like when you and I are together, because it frightens me. And my answer is, well, then I suggest you don't listen, because I'm not here to tell you a bedtime story or put on your big boy pants and listen to what we're telling you and consider it. I mean, I don't know what to say to remarks like that. I'm sorry. My intention is to educate you,
what they're saying
not frighten you.
You scared the hell out of me, and I'm going to continue to listen to you, and I'm going to criticize you over it. That's insanity at its best, but that's basically what's going on. I consider that as much of a compliment as the person that says, hey, love the show, because it tells me something inside them really does want to hear this. They really do want to know.
Yes, they do. And there's something else I want to just touch on really quickly, and it's a very sad thing, and it's been done to these people because they feel they have to. Lots of people have very strange encounters, lost time, they know they were taken, just all kinds of very weird strangeness, which, by the way, Mr. Bigelow admitted to, that what goes on in the Skinwalker Ranch is so bizarre that they're having a hard time actually researching it. Well, that there tells you that, the truth of the matter is a great deal to digest, and he just wants you to take a little bite because he can't serve it on a platter to you yet. But what really is upsetting to me at times is I'll be listening to someone giving an interview or reporting an encounter they had, and I know through some of what they're saying that they definitely had something happen to them. Then it happens. They embellish it. They have this need to fluff it up because they don't think you will respond to it or believe them unless they make it grander than it actually was. And I think a lot of very big stories that we've been told about very famous encounters went down this road, because actually most of the encounters that I have heard, they are short, sweet, and to the point. There was not a lot of embellishment. They were conscious, putting out the trash 1 minute, and the next minute they wake up 200 miles away, and their chests are burned, they're sick, they're vomiting, they're on their knees, and they only have maybe a flash of what happened to them left in their memory. That's closer to a real report of something that actually happened. But that's only 5 minutes. So if you're on a radio show, how do you, and you've got to fill an hour with something that took 5 minutes, you begin to do what everybody else you hear, what they said, and all of a sudden it's grays, and they flew you around, and, taught you the meaning of life, when actually that didn't happen. So, if I could say anything to the people that are experiencing these terrible things, don't do that. You don't have to make it up. I know you feel you have to because people make you, but don't. Just stay to the facts.
That's actually great advice, and it's kind of one of the things that I've been back and forth with in my own heart lately was, did I even want to continue to do the UFO thing? I think I actually said that on the last show that I did last season, and the reason for that is because you can't pad it. Some of it's just real. People can write books about this, but the books deal, there's still a lot of embellishment out there among researchers too, who have ladled a lot of elaborate things onto this. Like I said, ufology and the paranormal are not one thing. They are many things, and we are puzzling over all of the little things, because anybody who's an experiencer is still puzzling over what they experienced. If they weren't, it would be a closed matter. So we're dealing with layers and layers of experiences that represent a multitude of different things, and we're trying to make sense out of it. Don't clean it up. It'll clean itself up as we go through the course of doing the research and pulling all this together. I think there's actually somewhere in all of that a little bit of wisdom that Chris and I both kind of understand right now.
Yeah, absolutely right. So, as far as you and I are concerned, we get tired. And as many a times where I say, this is it. It's the last thing I'm going to write. I'm walking out. I can't do this anymore. And I know that you've had the same feelings. And then comes along Robert Bigelow in the middle of the night, after a long day of colored eggs and family and chocolate bunnies, and tells us, those of us like you and I, that he's going to now to start to tell us that yes, there's UFOs and aliens and all kinds of strangeness out there, and yes, he's going to take over and go after space and privatize it. Now, those things are massive, major news stories, but besides you and I don't know who else is talking about it recently. Do you?
I don't, but I think we have, and I think we're going to get this. We're going to get this show out. As we're talking now, it's Saturday night. By Sunday tomorrow, this will be on YouTube. You'll have it. I'll have it. We'll put it out. Chris, any final words as we go out of this interview tonight? Anything you'd like to go out saying?
Yeah, I just think that people now really have to stop keeping themselves in an enclosed, tight bubble, which I know it's very hard times at this point in history, but a lot's going to happen, whether you like it or not. And the more knowledge and information you have, the better off you are at survival on all things. So include this, because you are now being told it's part of your future. It's part of now. It's been happening probably since we've been on this planet. But you're now going to start to slowly come face to face with a lot of things that you just didn't want to think about. So open your minds, do your research, and listen to people like Randy and I. We've been down these roads. Maybe we can teach you something. And don't be afraid. You can have all your life to be afraid, but right now you got to learn how to deal with things and deal with them when they hit you. After it's over, you can have a good cry. So be strong, open your minds, and educate yourselves.
I got nothing better to add to that. This has been a fun interview. Well, fun sometimes is a sort of dealing with my dark sense of humor, but I can't think of a better way to spend a Saturday evening with my friend Chris Holly. The way you find her is just web search Chris Holly's Paranormal World, and her website will come up real fast, and there's a lot of information there that you can access as well. You can find us at offplanetradio.com and the live broadcast at offplanetradio.net on Wednesday nights from 9 to 11 p.m. I'm Randy Moggins. The truth is out there. It's inside you. We'll be back again very soon. Good night.